Welcome to Through the Glass Recovery Podcast, where we believe that connection is the opposite of addiction, vulnerability is the antidote to shame, and that recovery isn't just rewarding, but also a lot of fun. We're your hosts, Julie and Steve. Listen as we get together with friends to shed light on the hard things, talk about the other side of addiction, and how we create a life so full there's no space left for alcohol.
In this episode, we invite our friends Paula, Alex, and Brian to explore with us the idea of living intentionally. What does living intentionally mean? What does it look like in day-to-day life? We dive into subjects like authenticity, values, making choices that reflect our intentions, and how that all works for us in recovery.
Remember that every time you hit like, or especially subscribe or follow, it lets the podcast platforms know that you think we've shared valuable content here, and other people that might benefit from our podcast will be more likely to see it.
Tonight we have Paula, Brian, and Alex as our guests. Would you guys like to introduce yourselves?
My name is Paula, and I have been welcomed to this crazy podcast. I am 800 and I can't remember what sober, which is nearly 28 months. So closing in on the 2.5 year mark, and I couldn't be happier. So thank you for welcoming me tonight.
Welcome, Holly. We also have our friend Brian and Alex here tonight. Ladies first.
Hi, I'm Alex. I have, the better part of almost 8 months sober now. And it's really been the best time of my life. And I've been really honored to walk alongside all these amazing people. So I'm really happy to be here.
Brian?
Yeah, thanks, Steve and Julie, for having me. My name is Brian. Be 46 on Monday. This is my fourth go-round at sobriety. I'm on day 69 today. I live in northern New Jersey. I am married, though my marriage is going through a bit of a rough spot right now, which is not 100% attributable to alcohol, but definitely is a big factor. And have 2 daughters, have a dog, and yeah, I'm excited to be here. I got a chance to do this once before with Steve and Julie. It was a lot of fun, so I'm sure tonight will be too. Again, maybe even more so with Polly. So we'll see.
Polly forgot to say she lives in Texas. You can tell by the accent. Cold in Texas. It's only 93 degrees.
Oh.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. So, one thing I think we've all learned as we make our way through the process of recovery is that we no longer get to just float through life. We don't get to sit back and let life do what it will while we watch from the sidelines. Recovery is about building a life of intention, of purpose. What does living intentionally mean to you? What does that look like in your life?
Do we dive in here and just give our views?
Absolutely.
Holly?
Well, speaking as an old lady, because I am the ancient one here, people say it's living with purpose. It's not, to me, living with purpose. Living with intent is just living meaningful, living a life I want to live, not a life that someone else has given me sort of thing. It's a life I want to live. It's doing the things that I want to do. And one of the things, because here we go, I told you earlier, you gave me the topic and off I went down a rabbit hole. And the first thing it says, living with intention is living with your own free will. So it says it's living with free will. But to me, it's having, I'm going to drift a bit. When you go to AA, the one thing they tell you is you get up in the morning and you make your bed. A lot of them say their prayers. Then you do your shower. Then you do your breakfast. That is living with intent of looking after yourself. And the one thing we talk about in sobriety is being selfish with yourself. And it's not as selfish as in me. That's not the way it is. It's living in a selfish way that benefits you so that you can give it to others.
Correct. Yeah.
One of the things that I learned early in my first round of sobriety. I walked into a therapist's office and I told her, I have no idea who I am. I need help figuring this out. And I was starting to get into the Brene Brown authenticity stuff. And I had no idea who I was or what I stood for. And so the very first exercise I did with her, she gave me a packet of 7 or 8 papers, and it was a list of personal values. So it was every value any person could ever hold, everything from being dependable and loyal to being creative or adventurous, to keep looking after your health, to caring for others, all of these different values. And she's like, all you need to do is whittle this down to your top 10. There must have been 200 or 300 words on there. Like, the fascinating thing when I started going through them was there were so many on there I felt like I should value. It was really hard for me to separate what I thought I should do from what I really felt was me. And it was a process. It took me a couple of weeks of really studying those words to come up with a list of 10 values that actually reflected what I stood for and what my beliefs were. And from there, which that in itself was huge because it helped me define who I was and how I wanted to live my life. From there, I realized that any decision you make, any action, any words that leave your mouth, anything you do, if you compare those to your list of values, you can determine whether you're living intentionally or not. And it's interesting because as you do that more and more often, you'll do something and it just like feels wrong. Like you feel like this twist in your gut. And it's because you're living incongruently with the things that you value the most. I think the more and more you live that way and the more you pay attention to all of those decisions applying directly to your values, the more you recognize when you're not making decisions intentionally.
Living authentically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Polly, touching on what you were saying with, the self-care part of it, reminded me of, especially when you touched on AA, because that was where I started. The first thing that I did with intent, starting on day 1, was I asked for help. I went to a meeting. I intentionally went to that meeting. I didn't know what I was going to get, but I needed help, and I went and got help. And then when I was there, they said, keep coming back. So I carved out time in my day to go to meetings in the evening. I intentionally made sure that the kids went to bed at 7:30 so I could make it to an 8 o'clock Zoom meeting. Everything drove around that time. I set that 1 hour out, and that was 1 hour that I intentionally set down for me. It was the first time I had ever done it in who knows how long. And it grew. It helped me say, no, this is my time.
Mm-hmm.
This is the time that I need for myself, which is something I'd never done.
Your boundary.
Right.
Your very first boundary was that 1 hour. This is my hour.
Yeah. I need to do this.
Yeah. It was like, anyone who's listened to my story, my first time getting sober, I won't say sober. I always say my first time with not drinking because I never really educated myself on becoming sober.
Mm-hmm.
This time I did. So I can say I'm sober now. But the first time I went to AA and I used AA and my meetings became vital to me, that 1 hour.
Mm-hmm.
Because to me at the time, that 1 hour was just stopping me from going and drinking. That hour became important. And it's what we say. And here's an expression that I read here in this thing. And it says, are you living life or is life living you? Because if you're not living with intention, you're not living life.
And I feel similar, Steve. So I was letting life live me for a long time. But when I really made the conscious choice for sobriety, I made the time. I was intentional every single day.
Yep.
When I was early on, I know everyone knows I had a meeting on my calendar every day. And I was there if I was driving, and the video and sound was off if I was folding laundry for the millionth time. I made it. Well, I made it a point to be there because it was so instrumental in my sobriety for me.
Yes.
And instead of there's always another task, always another thing, something to do, but I'm like, I have to do this for me, period. And I was very intentional. I mean, I still am. That's why I had to leave my house tonight, but I'm like very intentional about the things that are going to keep me sober. So
how about you, Brian?
Well, when you said what you said about taking, and I'm paraphrasing, I don't remember exactly how you said it, but putting yourself first, it reminded me, and this came up in a conversation that I had last night, and I have a hard time remembering that. But I think it's right. It's true for me anyway. And it reminded me of actually a post that I wrote in a prior, a long time ago. I wrote something about this. I likened it to, when you're on an airplane and they warn you that, the oxygen masks come down. You got to take care of yourself first, right? Your inclination might be to help somebody else, but you don't help yourself, you ain't helping anybody else. And I think that's true here too. So yeah, what you said there resonated with me.
It does, because once we start making ourselves feel good, what we've got inside that's starting to feel good comes out. Because if we're happy in here, then we give out that happiness. I truly believe that what we feel comes out of us in, how many times are we grumpy and then everybody else in the house is all grumpy because we are. When you snap and bite at people, so people start snapping and biting at you. When you're laughing and happy and stuff like that, and you've got that joy inside you, it reflects outwards and other people feel that. So when you concentrate on yourself first, then you're doing it for other people as well in a roundabout way.
I think the really interesting part is how that changes over time. So you carve out the time intentionally. It could be for anything, but it could, your interests change. Inside the growth that happens in sobriety, you continue down that path. I took up reading. I have not sat down and intentionally given myself the time to continue the book that I'm reading right now. And really, it's something that I want to do. So I did. I started. I read that book and I broke through that wall. But the only way I can keep up with that is I have to intentionally set time for myself, just like in anything else. I have to set that time down and say, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to read for half an hour, 3 times a week. I don't do that. So because I don't do that, that book is still sitting there on the same page it was 2 weeks ago.
This all reminds me of the time management chapter in Rewired.
Does that?
It does. I've been working on Rewired for the last year since I first quit drinking. And I have really successfully made my way through pretty much every chapter except for time management. And I go and I start working through time management and I start working on the journaling questions. And then I just kind of don't like the answer, because reality is I'm choosing to spend my time in ways that don't actually reflect my priorities. And like that's not super comfortable because I want to do the things that I'm still doing. But reality is, I get kind of antsy and not super happy when I start digging into the way that I'm spending my time, because I'm not content with it. But I'm also, I don't know, like you have to mean it and then you have to follow through with it. And sometimes that means giving up one thing because something else actually is more important to you. And I think you can spend, I don't know, we all have a certain amount of time each day and we choose how we get to spend it. And I think that with everything you choose to do, you have to look at it and ask yourself, is this worth the time and energy that I'm giving to it? And it's really easy to start removing things from your life when you look at it that way. If I've got 24 hours in a day, is spending one of those hours scrolling through Facebook really worth that time? Or is spending one of those hours with a friend that just wants to gossip and talk nonsense for an hour, is that really worth my time? And it makes it, I don't know, just to look at it that way, this limited amount of time and energy, it makes it easier to decide how you're going to spend that time. And you don't just let it disappear so much anymore the way we used to.
I think when I first came into the I Am Sober and started with this sobriety this time, I found that I needed the structure of time management. Like Steve was saying, he needed his hour at AA. I needed the structure of the time management and in the early days. And I would carve out that time for some yoga, for some meditation, because to me, those were vital tools. I'm further along in my sobriety now, and those things are not just now my sober tools. Those have become something I enjoy doing for me because they serve me in a way that helps me live sober at the end of the day. It, like Steve was saying, things do change, and we change the longer we stay sober. I mean, Alex watched the growth with, well, I've watched the growth with all of you actually, and I've watched what's happened, and your mind changes the longer you stay sober. That yes, the focus is to stay sober, but you shift away from so much of the sobriety and start looking into more of the self-care. Like you were saying about the time management, Julie, you do start making more notice of those the longer you stay sober, because those, you start recognizing the things that become more important to you, to yourself. Would you else know what I'm talking about?
I'm totally lost right now. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, I know.
Horror, you little horror. You got to be a middle child.
I'm actually the oldest.
You're the oldest.
Nah,
You know,
and a short.
my oldest. Then
No.
he's actually he's a horror as well. So yeah, go ahead.
No, the topic for tonight, Steve and Julie, I just did sort of a stream of consciousness, brain dump on the keyboard, and I'll start by saying, and I know Steve, you know this, I am not in a great spot right now. I'm not in a horrible spot. I'm kind of turning the corner, and I'm really trying hard to be, to not get a case of the woe is me's, which I guess is, that's living with intent right there. But the first thing I wrote down was, I don't know that I'm really doing this. I love the opening statement that you read, Steve, and but I don't know. So what I did was just wrote down, and I'm just going to rattle these off. It's about 20 things that what does it mean to live with intent? So I wrote down, in no particular order, taking responsibility and ownership. I wrote down creating my own reality. I wrote down deciding who I want to be and not be. Julie, when you were talking about values, all that stuff you were saying, this is one of the ones that's most important to me. Who do you want to be, and who not? Who do you not want to be? Making a plan or having a vision, and then executing, right? Doing what you need to do to see it through. Setting priorities, something else that I heard, I think that was you again, Julie. Subscribing to self-care, heard that tonight. Seeking clarity, being in the moment, stop trying to escape or numb out. Be in the moment, be here now. Really listening, paying attention to the world around me, take it in, the smells, the sights, nature, all that jazz. Embracing quiet, just breathing once in a while, just being there with your breath. Connecting with people, with yourself. I think when I wrote that, I was thinking of people. And take a beat before you act is one it's a big one for me. Considering the consequences, setting boundaries, avoiding triggers, keeping perspective, understanding what to let go of and when to let it go, going all in, doing something that makes a difference. And then I wrote, lastly, if I could be so cliche, living one day at a time. So, that's a lot. And then I went through that. It's about 22 or 23 things. And I looked at those and I said, of those 22 or 23, I can probably say I have 6 that are done. And then I said, no, I can't. I can say I have 0 that are done. I can say I have about 6 that are in progress. None of those things are done, right? They're never done. So you're
Progress, not perfection.
Yeah.
Right. So none of those are done. But 6 out of 22 or 23, I'm like, that sucks. That's like, I feel like I'm back in high school geometry again or something. But But I think that's okay. I think getting to the priorities, this was a great exercise for me to go through and put this, pen to paper and come up with this list. And now I can look at these, and I did, and I can kind of pick the ones that I feel like I'm on a good track with. What are the ones I want to prioritize and work on? And Julie, the first one I wrote to prioritize was just deciding who I wanted to be and not be, the values. What are my values? So, I think that's a big one. And then I identified some that I think are going to be really, really big hurdles for me as well.
We've all got hurdles we have to climb. I mean, life gets in the way a lot at the time. I mean, you can get up in the morning with intention of doing this, and this. Like most people who are still working, the alarm clock goes off. So the intention is to get up, make the coffee, have a shower, put your lunch together and go to work. But who knows what is going to come at you from the rest of the world through that day that you have to cope with. So there are going to be things that will crop up. But like the one thing you said there, Brian, that I find truly, truly valuable. Step back, take a deep breath, pause, and then re-look at it. Look at it again, because it's proactive, not reactive. And what you were saying, when I did this one, this rabbit hole I went down, it said, what is it that makes your life worth living? What do you want your life to be? Who do you want to be? Which is the question we keep coming up with here. Who do I want to be? And how can I express my special gifts and characteristics? That's exactly what you were talking about, Julie. And I think, and then we've got, what can I introduce into my life that will give me fulfillment, joy, and a sense of direction? Here we go. Intent, direction. It's having something there. And what would I like mentioned about me if there was a funeral service?
I've thought about that. What are people going to say when I die? Like, I'm interested.
I always said I didn't want my kids to sit around and say, "Oh, her mom's dead. She was a drunk."
Yeah.
I want my kids to have a nice memory of me. Yeah. Speak nicely at my funeral, please, kids, if you're listening. But no, I mean, it is. Who do I want to be? I want to be me. Mm-hmm. I don't want to be Steve. I don't want to be Julie. I don't want to be Alex or Brian. I want to be me, Paula. Right. Because in our own way, we're all unique. And if we keep trying to be like other people, it's not going to work.
It hasn't worked for a really long time.
And you won't be really happy because you're not being your authentic self. Yeah, you're all meant to be you. And there's only one you on this planet. So it was kind of, I had talked to Julie, it was kind of synchronistic, if that is even a word, of how this happened. The day that she had told me the topic of this podcast, I was listening to another podcast. And the gentleman had talked about like a Buddhist teaching, and it talked about our action always follows our intention. And for some reason that really stuck with me, and I like wrote it in my phone. And then later that day, she's like, this is what the podcast is about, intentions and sobriety. And I'm like, that's just, but you think about it, with everything you do follows your intention. You know, when I was drinking, all of my actions followed my intentions to drink every day. And now that I'm sober, my actions follow all of my intentions in sobriety, physical fitness, mental fitness, time for myself. Like my actions are showing the fruit of all of that. It's pretty cool to see it all unfold.
I don't know that I think I'm in the early throes of living with intention, where I'm at in my journey right now. And I hadn't stopped to give that thought and writing those things down. And I'm adding to that as I'm listening to the four of you talk. I'm going to come up with a list and that I can put in priority order and work on things, one at a time. Just stop starting, start finishing. Work on one thing, get it done, and don't get it done, but get it to a good state. And then I guess what I'm saying is I think this is going to be a really good exercise in self-improvement for me. Something that I don't know at what point in the journey I would have come around to think about, coming up with a list like this, if I even would have had this question, this topic not been posed. So yeah, I'm quite pleased with it.
And I think when you make a start, you end up with a sort of natural progression into other areas.
Mhm.
You have a starting point, and then you progress. Your list you'll have a starting point on it, and you'll progress through each item on that list. And before you know it, you'll think, oh, hang on a minute, I need a new list.
Or you need
No.
to start over sometimes and develop those skills further.
I say everything is a cycle. Everything. We have 4 seasons for a reason. We have the 1st of January for a reason, because we're going to go through another 4 seasons. Everything is a cycle. And it's like everything in our sobriety. The first time you come into it, you're working so hard on just not drinking, staying sober. That's your focus for the first 100 days. It's just, that's your intention.
Thanks for saying that. I think I needed to hear that, because like I said, I had this list, and I'm like, I've got 15% of these things that I could even take partial credit for. But no, I'm on day 69. My focus right now, and I'm one day at a time winning, but I'm winning that one. And that should be my intention right now more than anything else. Is my sobriety. So that was good to hear.
Whatever you have to do to be sober, like your intent is that. So in my early sobriety, and even now, my life is formed around the intention of staying sober. So how do I make my whole life fit my intention to be sober? All of my actions fit my intention to maintain lifetime sobriety. And it's working so far. So
everything else moves and shifts with that intent.
And that's okay.
So,
my sobriety is the center. Because that's the most important thing.
Right. And when it doesn't match, you feel it.
Yeah. I
When it doesn't,
something.
Yeah.
Which is what Julie was saying about when you don't feel, when you're doing something and it doesn't feel right. Yeah. That's what you were saying. That's exactly it.
It's not congruent. And one of the hardest things.
Please don't use big words.
I'm like over here Googling.
I like this.
What the hell did you just say?
One of the hardest
about her now is she talks back to me. Oh, it's him. See, look.
One of the hardest things I found was having my words match my intention, which means I had to say it out loud. And that means I had to stand behind it. And when I had to stand behind it, that means I'm telling myself, I believe in what I'm saying. For the first time in a really long time, when you turn around and start believing in what you're saying, and then it matches your intentions, you have to move along that path, regardless of what happens outside of you.
Or if you're comfortable or not.
Exactly.
You might not even be comfortable.
And it goes all the way to down to simply reacting or responding.
Mm-hmm.
So, go ahead.
No, I'm just thinking, I think of like being consciously reactive instead of just like emotionally reacting to everything. But anyways.
Oh yeah, actually, can you explain? I want to understand what you mean by that a little bit more. Reacting versus responding.
So, the reaction is something that is more. It's emotional. It's visceral. It's instant, and I haven't put much thought yet. It's brain, mouth, out. It's not heart, head, mouth. Everything matches when it goes heart, head, mouth. When my heart and my head align, everything I say comes from an authentic place. I'm not arguing with myself. I am not in an internal fight. I am not allowing the outside world to determine my actions. I'm coming from a place of honesty. I'm coming from a place of authenticity. I'm speaking from my heart, and I'm believing what I'm saying. So the hard part is when I was drinking, almost everything I did was a reaction. And then I responded to that reaction. Now I respond, and I get to think about how I'm going to react afterwards. I give myself a chance now, and it's not easy to do, It's a pause.
That's what Brian was saying. It comes into play with what you were saying on your list about taking a breath. Just taking a breath. And one of the things I learned, because I used to work as a telecommunications person, you can tell I used to because I can't stop talking. I was telecommunications for a very big hospital. And we'd get a lot of inquiries. Stock answer. Well, I haven't got the answer for that at the moment, but if you give me a little while, I'll go away and I'll have a look for it. Boom.
That reminds me of, with my kids, I have one of my kids in particular has a way of pushing my buttons. And it's one of those walk into the room, spring something on me, almost like she knows there's going to be a reaction, probably because for the last 20 years, there has been a reaction. And I learned somewhere or fairly early on in this particular year of sobriety to just say, okay, and then just leave it there. It would be, I'm going to do this thing or whatever. And I would just be like, okay, I'll come talk to you about it in a little bit. And that was it, because my instant response was like, my whole gut was twisted and I just wanted to be angry and say something mean or snotty or angry or whatever it was. And so I learned to just say, okay, just very calmly. And there were times that it would take me 24 hours to come back and talk about it. But I needed to make sure that I was responding to her with a place of love and compassion and all of those things that seem to go out of the window in those first few moments when you just react.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask, how did you get there, or how long did it take you to get there? Because that's one that I inherently, either if I'm not working on it, I'm not doing. Yeah, it's on my list, but that's one that I have to constantly work at.
We'll keep reminding you of this list as we go along, further along in these podcasts. We say, how many of you ticked off this list, Brian?
Brian, I'll tell you an experience that I had. I never even thought about this. This came up essentially in a conversation I had with Julie really early on. And this was something I had a problem with. And it came up in a conversation at work where I had to stand up for myself. And out of the blue, I had thought about this. I had consciously thought about this. You can prepare for as much as you want to prepare for, and you're not prepared.
Yeah.
Right? You're not. And at some point, you're going to turn around and someone's going to say something, and you're going to tell yourself, this is what happened to me. I told myself, I don't have to react. And I just waited. There's two things. One of the things I decided not to do is I made myself a rule. I am not going to say sorry for everything. I am not going to say sorry unless I believe I did something wrong. That first rule. And as soon as I started doing that, I stopped feeling guilty for things that I didn't do. I stopped taking emotional responsibility for other people, and I had nothing to say. I ran out of words because I stopped taking the response out of other people's mouth. Sorry for that not happening or whatever it was. I couldn't say it anymore. I made myself the rule. I couldn't take that away. What that created was the pause. And instead of me owning what they needed to own, it let them own it. It let them turn around and because I had nothing to say. I couldn't take it away. Then it left it on them instead of on me.
I think when we're drinking, we're always apologizing for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Always. And we feel it's our responsibility to apologize for other people as well.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I agree with you there. We don't need to apologize to someone else. If I do something wrong, I will own it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you do something wrong, I'm not owning your mistake. Stuff that. I've got enough. I own enough stuff. It's right. It is exactly right. And that's like with the pause. And like Julie saying, she waits sometimes 24 hours before she responds.
To go back to what Brian asked, I think we tend to react in ways we're probably going to regret the most often with people that we were are really close to, with our family, with our kids, with our spouse, with our parents. Those are the people that it's easiest to just pop off with something instant and shitty that you wish you hadn't said or wish you hadn't done. Those are the people it's easiest to do that with. It's also easiest to communicate to those people. I'm working really hard right now to not react and to respond more carefully. So in the future, if something comes up and I just tell you I need some time before I am ready to respond to that, just know that I'm trying to be really careful with my actions. Like I said that to my kid way before anything else came up so that I could just say, okay, I'll get back with you when I'm ready to respond to that. And we can do that with people that we're around all the time. I can say that to my husband and tell him I might need some time to process things. So if you say something, I might not be ready to have a conversation right now. It might need to wait a little bit. And I try not to leave people hanging for a really long time, but I also need to make sure that my head and my heart are in the same place and I'm able to respond with some amount of integrity.
The head and the heart come into this a lot because to me, the only time I got sober was when this and this came together. Because when your head and your heart come into this, you end up really wanting it. It's a desire. It's a true desire. And I always think that the emotions you're feeling manifest physically. So when your head and your heart are together, your emotions are a lot easier to deal with. Like Steve was saying about arguing with himself, when your head and your heart are not together and you're arguing with yourself, then you can't live with intention then, can you? Because you're just all over the place. If your mind is organized, then you can live with intention.
I just noticed like the more as you are sober, the more sobriety you have and the more your body heals on a physiological level, like the more clarity you can have. You're healing your brain, you're nourishing yourself, you're whatever. Even if you're not living the most perfect, healthy lifestyle, you're not ingesting poison every day. So you're able to allow your brain and your neurons and everything else to heal so you can think clearly. You can have more sound reactions. You can take that time to pause before reacting. Like Julie said, I tell my kids sometimes I need a mom timeout. That's my intention, is to not react. Now, as a mom, before I was like just reactive over everything. But in my sobriety, I've been very intentional about not reacting the way I was before and being more calm and taking the time and emotionally connecting. And I'm able to do that with the healing I've given my brain and body, in sobriety, of not just being a complete basket case all the time.
What I was thinking, listening to Alex talk there, I mean, this is the Captain Obvious to your statement, I guess, but you can't do very much of anything with intention, if you're not sober, at least, like to the degree that a lot of us probably weren't sober with regularity. Am I finding myself calmer? Yeah, I've always been a bit of a hot temper, frankly, but it's like just about anything else, it's worse when I'm drinking, and not necessarily even in the moment, but just across the board. If I'm in a state of drinking every day or regularly, I'm more prone to fly off the axle, fly off the handle, whatever, you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So yeah, 100%. I would say I'm am I perfect? No, not even close with respect to calmness or anything. But yes, I am more calm.
Mm-hmm. There's one more thing I wanted to touch on, and it's something Paula mentioned, and it also came up in Brian's list. And that is the gifts that we have. It goes into our personalities and who we are. And I firmly believe every person in this world has gifts and talents that come to them naturally, that if they're using them, they will feel more fulfilled. And really, that's what we need to do, is create a life that is fulfilling. If we can take the time to discover those gifts, I think that shows us what actions to take, what direction to move in order to make our lives feel full. And I think that a lot of us, if you had told me a year and a half ago, when I was at my rock bottom, you have gifts to develop, to grow, to make this world a better place, I would have told you were crazy. I didn't have the self-worth enough to even start looking at who I was and what gifts I might have. And the longer you're sober and the more you do the work of recovery, the more you develop your self-worth. And I think that if we all stop and look at the gifts that we were given and the talents that we have, and we take the time to develop those and put time into those, the world could be a really wonderful place and our lives would be so full for it. And I think it's something worth thinking about and asking yourself, what are your natural gifts?
Guys, Julie and I would like to thank you three, Paula, Brian, and Alex, for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
You do realize it's just my bedtime.
No, I do now.
Isn't it like 7, like 5 minutes on there? Hey, this was a really, really good topic for me. Yeah, it's something that doesn't come naturally for me, living with intention or focusing on self-worth like we just talked about at the end there. So yeah, the discussion was beneficial. So I just want to say thanks.
Really glad you're here, Brian. And thank you so much for sharing. Your list was amazing, by the way.
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
Thanks.
I don't know if you're willing to do this, but if you would consider sending me that list, I would love to maybe include it in the show notes, because that was a really incredible list. And I think it would be really neat for people to be able to read if you're willing. If you're not comfortable with it, that's fine.
Sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you very much for having me.
This was wonderful.
I enjoyed myself.
We'd also like to thank our listeners for sharing space with us. Remember to subscribe or follow to keep getting new content. And if you have any comments or topic suggestions, email us at throughtheglassrecovery@gmail.com. We'll see you next time as we continue to explore life on the other side of alcohol.